Welcome back to another episode of the Esoteric Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Dan Crisafulli. My apologies for the delay in uploads. The holiday season, coupled with a move and some delayed travel plans, had my recording gear tied up in transit. But nonetheless, I'm back with the first installment of the Occult Anatomy episodes. Occult Anatomy is an interesting subject. If you listen to the previous episode, I went over a chapter from Manly P. Hall's book, Man, the Grand Symbol of the Mysteries. The chapter serves as an insight into the world of occult anatomy. It referenced many great thinkers throughout history, and the fact that many who offer the foundations of our material sciences were also involved in some kind of esoteric or metaphysical work. This also served as a way to remind the listener that material science and the spiritual world are, and always have been, intertwined. They work in unison to bring us the novel experience of existence on this earthly realm we call home. The greatest minds ever to exist understood that the principles of magic, hermeticism, esotericism, and mysticism are all just as true as the material sciences of, say, medicine, botany, physiology, and many more. You can have one without the other, but the question remains whether you'll be able to get the entirety of one without the other. Occult Anatomy examines that deeper, while also drawing from the greatest religious works of our time. The Bible, most notably here in the West, may not be a literal story as most believe it to be, but a grand allusion to the wonders and mysteries of the human body, a roadmap of how man can come to know himself, and through that, know the world. There is no mystery, no marvel in all the universe that is greater than man himself. Man, know thyself, confronts us, down through the ages, but only a few have paid attention to the voice of the Delphic oracle. Only few have looked within. George Carey. Let's start this episode with a bit of physical anatomy to lay the groundwork for what's to come. We all know that every human has a skull, which houses the brain, which descends and becomes the spinal cord that reaches down the spinal column, ending somewhere around the back of the body behind where the solar plexus is. Below this, the spinal cord branches out and feeds offshoots of nerves down to the lower parts of the body. Obviously, there are branches of nerves all along the spinal cord that shoot off into all extremities and serve to allow us to control, with extreme precision, our bodily movements. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that within this same nervous system, there are also movements and impulses that we don't have to consciously think about or control. The body is a self-reliant machine. It gives feedback and sustains the most vital parts of life, all day, every day, without us even noticing. It's truly miraculous, but I feel like no one, especially materialist scientists, give the body enough credit. It allows us to feel, think, do, act, react, and learn. Perhaps beyond this magnificent housing of the soul, there is even more which hasn't been unveiled. The Bible is replete with allegory. Great works like the Bible are great due to the fact that there are multiple levels of understanding. One person may revere the story of Jesus simply because it's inspirational. But if you want to look for more within that story, there will be more for you to find. If you don't find Jesus, the actual man who walked the earth, as a satisfying enough account, then maybe the notion that Christ, or Christos, is a title, like Buddha, given to an ascended master, not a man's last name. Maybe that's not good enough either. Maybe you'd agree with primitive Christians and the Essenes, who fully realized that Christ was another name for a substance, an oil, or even an ointment that was contained in the spinal cord, today known as the cerebrospinal fluid. These are valid inferences reached by many great thinkers who have elected to not take the Bible for face value. While it is a mesmerizing story, or book of stories, the fact remains that the reason why it was written how it was could have had to do with a greater message, a message for those who were willing to look a bit deeper, to do the work, to investigate beyond what was just handed to them, to find out deeper secrets and use those secrets to attain a level of self-knowledge. You might be asking, well, if the Bible and other great religious works are the key to attaining enlightenment or a greater understanding, then why wouldn't they just hand it out to everyone? The simple answer is that some aren't ready to uncover the deeper mysteries. They will twist them, change them, use them for personal gain, distort them, and muddy the message up even further. Such are the lower aspects of human nature. It's an undeniable truth that the individual mind has a far greater propensity for insight and knowledge than the masses. We go now back to the solar plexus and spinal column and its relation to the stories contained within the Bible. Have you ever heard the saying, throw the ball and hit him right in the breadbasket, popular in schoolyard football games? This is an allusion to Bethlehem. In Hebrew, Beth meaning bread and Lehem meaning house or house of. The house of bread, or Bethlehem, is the solar plexus. These major nerve systems, the vagus nerve, the spinal cord, and others, as we will come to in a bit, all meet in a cluster around the solar plexus. Taking the quote from the Bible, I am the bread of life, to a whole new level. All functions of life are necessary with the aid of the nerves that cluster in the house of bread, the bread of life. The pituitary and pineal glands located in the cranium, or holy of holies, are innervated by a cervical ganglion and descend by way of the spinal column down the spinal cord, or river of Jordan, to the solar plexus, or Bethlehem. These glands are each referred to in many texts as the seat of the soul and offer some of the most profound additions to our corporeal existence as well as our spiritual development. They also have their place within the biblical allegories. Each of these glands produces a secretion as part of their function. One gland secretes a milky substance, while the other secretes a honey-like substance. In the book of Exodus 3:8, God promises to take the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. In Hinduism, the Kundalini Energy is the energy that rises from the lower part of man, or the first chakra located at the base of the spine. This energy ascends up the spinal column and meets with the highest area in man, the head. The same can be said when speaking of the rising of the cerebrospinal fluid into the, quote, kingdom of heaven, or the head. This parallel between esoteric Christianity and Hinduism is an example of how each culture around the world had created its own way of interpreting this act of illumination, or enlightenment, the raising of the Christ to the kingdom of heaven, to illuminate the world. The rising of the serpent to the crown chakra. The ideas are all there. Whether one places practices Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, or Judaism, each allegory has its own names, locations, stories, and references. But the message, when correctly decoded, brings the same answers. More often than not, the signs in these great religions' stories point to the complexities hidden within the human body, or the cosmos, the macrocosm and the microcosm. The signs of the zodiac are also referred to as the children of Jacob in the Bible, and when applied in physiology refer to the solar plexus and the 12 forces entered there through the 12 dorsal or thoracic vertebrae. All forces which enter the body of man are received there and must be sent out from there. In John 12:32 we read, If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. George Carey, in his work God-Man, the Word Made Flesh, explains that John esoterically refers to a substance, likely oil. Now we take that passage, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me, and apply some occult anatomy to it, and get, if I, the oil, the Christ or Christos, be lifted up, raised up through the river of Jordan, or up through the spinal cord, I will draw all men unto me. All will become illumined, saved, enlightened by the oil reaching the kingdom of heaven. In Joshua's story, we find that he commanded the sun and moon to stand still while he slew his enemies. The semilunar ganglion, a large crescent-shaped sensory ganglion of the trigeminal nerve located in the trigeminal cave, is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid, which is attached to the solar plexus, and it's akin to a crescent moon. These nerves from the solar plexus extend to the lower parts of the body and make contact with the organs of generation, or sexual organs. No wonder Joshua commanded that these forces stand still while he slew his enemies, which could be thought of as the lower, more animal desires of man. Referring back to the significance of the 12 thoracic vertebrae, these could also be interpreted esoterically as the 12 stones under the Jordan River from the Bible, the 12 vertebrae underneath the spinal cord. The Jordan River, geographically, flows from the Sea of Galilee down into the Dead Sea. It's no coincidence that the Dead Sea, named appropriately, is inferior at the bottom, or death of the soul of man occurs when he is lost in the animal desires. This is where Sodom, the most base operations of man, the first chakra, the lowest vibratory actions, take place. We now come to Golgotha, the place of Jesus' crucifixion. In Aramaic, Golgotha translates to skull. In his book, George Carey argues that nowhere does the word crucifixion mean death. Crossed electrical wires create a more powerful current. We cross-breed animals to produce more desirable and powerful breeds. Crucifixion is specifically on a cross. This process of crossing or crucifixion is an empowerment, a process of adding power, the power of enlightenment. When Christ is taken to Golgotha to be crucified, it's a symbolic representation of the cerebrospinal fluid being raised to the skull where enlightenment can be attained. I'll end this episode with a quote from George Carey. Can we no longer doubt that the ancient records told the same story as found in our scriptures, and that it was all in regard to one thing, one process, the mastery of the body? I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time for the next installment of the Occult Anatomy episodes. Thanks for listening.